Hi, I'm Malis. Last year at my own mother's birthday party, my sister raised her glass and called me the leftover. And everyone laughed. Not just laughed, they meant it. They erased me from every photo. They saved every seat, except one for me. I spent a lifetime asking why I wasn't enough, until I realized maybe I was never supposed to sit at their table at all. But what they didn't know was that a year later, they'd have no choice but to stand and clap. Stay with me because the way it all unfolded, even I couldn't have written it better. I pulled up to my mother's house in Santa Barbara, a sprawling beige suburban property with perfectly trimmed rose bushes lined along the white picket fence. The sun was still high, a balmy spring afternoon wrapping the garden in warmth. My heels crunched against the gravel as I made my way to the backyard, where balloons bobbed in the breeze, and relatives gathered around rented tables draped in pastel tablecloths. There was no greeting committee for me. A few cousins gave half-hearted nods before quickly turning back to their conversations. Others didn't even glance up. I tucked a strand of hair behind my ear and clutched the small gift bag I brought, a thoughtful present that I knew deep down would barely be noticed. The air smelled of garden roses and fresh-cut grass. Glasses clinked. A Bluetooth speaker in the corner crackled out soft jazz. It all felt pleasant enough, but the weight in my chest made it hard to breathe. Near the platform, I spotted Mom Vera, glowing in a lemon-yellow dress, standing proudly beside my sister Callista. Callista was the very image of what Vera wanted in a daughter. Tall, composed, her salon blonde hair shimmering under the sunlight. In her manicured hands, she balanced an elaborate birthday cake topped with pink peonies and golden candles. I hovered awkwardly at the edge of the crowd, watching as Mom gushed loudly about Callista's latest promotion at a marketing firm downtown, the new condo she had just closed on, and the handsome orthopedic surgeon she had been casually dating. It was as if Callista's life was a curated museum exhibit, and Mom was the tour guide, making sure every visitor was properly impressed. "And let's not forget," Vera said with a beam so wide it could split her face, "Callista planned this entire party while juggling work and her new place. Isn't she just amazing?" The crowd clapped dutifully. Someone even whistled. I smiled politely, shifting my weight from one foot to another, my dress sticking uncomfortably to my back. Not a single word about me. No mention of how I helped organize the RSVP list, ordered the flower arrangements, or drove 2 hours from my side of town to be here. But I swallowed it down. I had long since learned that calling attention to the obvious only made things worse. Then came the toast. A hush fell over the group as Callista tapped her glass with a butter knife. Everyone turned. I sank into my chair, hoping to blend into the background. "I just want to say," Callista began, her voice light, syrupy sweet, "that it's so wonderful having everyone here today, especially Mom. You're the heart of this family." A chorus of agreement murmured through the crowd. I found myself nodding too, despite the cold settling in my bones. "And," she added, pausing for dramatic effect, "we can't forget about Malis, our little leftover." It hit like a slap. For a moment, there was silence, as if the universe itself paused to see what would happen next. Then came the laughter. First, a few chuckles, then full-blown guffaws from the older uncles in their ill-fitting khakis. Even Mom threw her head back and cackled, clapping Callista on the shoulder. "Well, someone's got to clean up after the party," Edric, Dad, muttered from across the patio, raising his beer bottle as if it were some kind of toast. The sound of their amusement stabbed deeper than any shout ever could have. I pressed my fingertips against the cool surface of my wine glass, willing myself to stay composed. Around me, faces either laughed openly or looked away awkwardly, pretending to suddenly find the sky, the food, the floor incredibly interesting. My throat burned. My vision blurred for half a second. I blinked rapidly, refusing to let tears spill over in public. Not here. Not like this. I glanced down and realized I had started picking at the hem of my dress, a nervous habit from childhood, back when hiding was the only form of defense I had. My nails had already loosened a tiny thread. The chair I sat on suddenly felt too hard, too small, as if I was shrinking inside it, or worse, being erased altogether. "Lighten up, Malis," Callista teased, lifting her glass. "It's just a joke." I smiled. or something that probably resembled one, and stood up. The laughter still buzzed around my ears like a cloud of gnats. "I'll get a refill," I said to no one in particular, walking toward the drink table with deliberate slowness, as if every step I took needed careful permission. The metal tub holding the wine bottles was half empty, the ice melting fast. I grabbed a bottle blindly, not caring what label it was, and refilled my glass almost to the brim. As I turned back, thinking maybe I could slip away for a few minutes to breathe, I caught the tail end of another joke drifting across the patio. "Yeah, like leftovers from last week's potluck," someone said, and they laughed harder this time. I didn't have to wonder who they were talking about. Not Callista, not the radiant center of Mom's universe. Me, Milas, the leftover. The glass in my hand trembled slightly. I tightened my grip until my knuckles whitened. In that moment, something inside me fractured. Not noisily like breaking glass, but silently, invisibly, the way old tree roots split under growing pressure underground. The night air was cool against my skin as I drove home, windows cracked just enough to let the salt-laced breeze from the ocean reach inside. The streets of Santa Barbara were quieter now, bathed in soft lamplight and the occasional flicker of neon signs from late-night diners. I pulled into the tiny lot behind my apartment building, the old gravel crunching under my tires. Inside, everything smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and the vanilla candle I'd forgotten to blow out that morning. I dropped my keys into the chipped ceramic bowl by the door, kicked off my shoes, and stood there a moment, still in my wrinkled party dress, still clutching the now empty glass I'd taken with me out of habit. The faintest trace of rose perfume clung to my sleeves, a bitter souvenir from an afternoon I wished I could scrub from my mind. I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror by the hallway, hair frizzed, makeup smudged, a tight line drawn across my mouth that I hardly recognized. I made my way to the couch, sinking into the sagging cushions with a heaviness I couldn't shake. My phone buzzed somewhere in my bag. I dug it out, expecting a stray text maybe, someone realizing they'd gone too far, someone apologizing for laughing. Instead, there was a notification from the family group chat. "Best Family Moments," the album title read. Against better judgment, I tapped it open. The first photo popped up. Vera and Callista, arms around each other, both flashing perfect smiles for the camera. Another photo, Dad raising a toast, Callista laughing with her head thrown back, Mom clapping gleefully. The images kept sliding across my screen, cake cutting, cousins dancing, Uncle Henry making goofy faces at the kids. I searched for myself without meaning to. I skimmed the backgrounds, corners, reflections, nothing. Another photo, Callista with her sorority friend from UCLA. Another, Vera and Edric with their neighbors. Even cousins I barely remembered made an appearance. But not me, not a shadow, not a blur of my dress, not a sliver of my hair in the corner of a frame. It was as if I had never been there. The same ache that had pressed against my ribs at the party now spread, slow and suffocating, like cold water filling my lungs. I set the phone down on the coffee table, but it was too late. The images branded themselves onto the backs of my eyelids. I leaned my head back, staring up at the popcorn ceiling. Faint cracks spiderwebbed above the old ceiling fan. They reminded me of old memories, fractured, spread thin over time, so easy to miss if you didn't look closely. In my mind, the memories started unspooling. Christmas dinner 4 years ago. I was the one behind the camera, capturing Callista's new puppy with a red ribbon around its neck, while Mom and Dad posed proudly by the tree. My place at the table sat empty in every photo. Mom's 50th birthday, the family photo taken at the beach. I had set up the tripod, fussed with the timer, told everyone to smile, and then been left running from the sand to the group, only to be cropped out of every frame that made it onto the mantle. Graduation day from college. A blurry cell phone shot Vera took just for memory's sake. She hadn't even stayed for the ceremony. Piece by piece, the pattern emerged. I hadn't been forgotten once. I had been erased over and over again, erased from their celebrations, erased from their memories, erased from the very proof that I belonged. A hollow laugh slipped from my mouth, but it caught halfway and splintered into something closer to a gasp. I grabbed the phone again, opening a new message to Mom. My fingers moved without thinking, tapping out the words. Am I not part of this family too? I stared at the blinking cursor, the question hanging there like a loose thread begging to be pulled. In another life, I might have hit send. I might have pleaded for acknowledgement, demanded to know why I was invisible in a house that once swore to love me unconditionally. But tonight, I knew better. I pressed the backspace key. One letter gone, another. The whole message disappeared, swallowed into silence like a scream buried beneath layers of polite smiles and fake laughter. Some voids, I realized, are too wide for any words to bridge. Instead, I placed the phone face down on the table, got up, and peeled the party dress off like shedding an old skin. I threw it into the laundry basket without ceremony, letting it fall in a crumpled heap. The roses still clung faintly to the fabric, but the sweetness now smelled rotten. Pulling on an old t-shirt and sweatpants, I crawled into bed without brushing my hair or washing off the lingering foundation smeared across my cheeks. The apartment around me hummed with the quiet noises of night, the distant creak of a neighbor's footsteps upstairs, the faint rattle of wind against the balcony door. I pulled the comforter up over my shoulders, even though it was too warm for it. Some instinct, deep and desperate, begged for the cocooning weight of it. Sleep came slowly, dragging me under like a riptide. That night, I dreamed I was standing outside a house, the old family house, back when it still smelled of lemon cleaner and chocolate cake baking in the oven. I knocked on the door, heart pounding, knowing my parents, my sister, my whole family were inside. I knocked again, harder. The lights flickered behind the curtains, and I heard laughter. But no footsteps came to answer. I kept knocking, the sound growing frantic, desperate. My fists hurt, my voice cracked. Still, the door stayed shut. The house glowed warm from the inside, but I was left standing in the cold, unseen, forgotten, a ghost pressing hands against windows no one bothered to look through. I pushed myself out of bed that morning, the light pouring through my blinds too golden, too cheerful for the ache still lodged in my chest. The cold inside me hadn't melted, not even close, but I had things to do, deadlines to meet, numbers to crunch, clients who didn't care whether my family thought I was disposable. After a quick shower and a coffee brewed far too strong, I pulled on my usual office outfit. Dark slacks, a pale blouse, low heels sensible enough for hours of standing. I tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear and glanced at my reflection. My face looked composed, almost convincing. Traffic was light, the drive to the firm short, and by the time I parked behind the small office building downtown, I'd buried the worst of the night before under a thin layer of determination. Inside, the hum of copy machines and muted phone conversations filled the air. I greeted a few colleagues with nods and polite smiles, setting my tote down beside my desk with a practiced thud. If nothing else, work had always been the place I could disappear into, a ledger that balanced, a project closed ahead of schedule. Numbers didn't lie, people did. Mid-morning, I grabbed my stainless steel mug and headed for the break room, hoping for a few minutes of quiet before diving back into the spreadsheets. Eliza, a junior associate, was already there, laughing over something on her phone. She waved when she saw me. "Hey, Milas, crazy weekend, huh?" she chirped, digging into a box of pastries someone had left on the counter. I smiled politely, pouring myself some burnt coffee. "Yeah, something like that." She sipped her latte, then said casually, "It was so sweet what your family did for your mom's dinner. I mean, it looked like everyone was there. Sad you couldn't make it, though." I froze, coffee halfway to my lips. "Dinner?" I repeated, forcing my voice to sound neutral. "Yeah." She scrolled on her phone, holding it out for me. "Saw it on Callista's feed. Looked beautiful. The fairy lights, the cake, the huge 'We love you, Mom' sign. You must have been so proud." I blinked at the screen. There they were, my family. Smiling beneath a canopy of white lights, clustered around a garden table bursting with food and laughter. Callista, Vera, Edric cousins, friends from the neighborhood. Even the woman who walked Vera's dog sometimes made the cut. I wasn't in a single frame, because I hadn't even been invited. Somehow the hurt felt sharper now, not because I missed the event itself, but because of the silent decision that preceded it. They didn't want me there, not enough to remember, not enough to notice my absence. I swallowed hard and managed a thin smile. "Yeah, proud. Eliza, oblivious, chattered on about her upcoming vacation plans. I nodded where appropriate, my mind retreating far, far away. Back at my desk, I mechanically sifted through emails. A small white envelope peeked out from the pile of mail someone had dropped onto my inbox earlier. No return address. Curious, I tore it open. Inside was a greeting card, all glitter and florals and scripted letters reading, "Happy birthday to a wonderful daughter." For a flicker of a second, something inside me softened. Maybe it wasn't all forgotten. I opened it. "Dear Callista, we're so proud of you every day. You light up our lives. Love, Mom and Dad." The pen lifted sharply mid-sentence, as if whoever wrote it realized their mistake too late, or didn't care enough to fix it. I stared at the name, not mine, sitting there in blue ink, like a slap across the face disguised as a pat on the back. The envelope had my name on it. The card did not. An afterthought, a scrap thrown toward me like tossing a bone to a dog already forgotten at the back door. The anger I expected didn't come, only a hollow kind of sadness, a deep resignation that felt heavier than any rage ever could. I placed the card flat on my desk, smoothing out the creases, tracing the name with my fingertip. Not as a keepsake, as evidence. Evidence of exactly where I stood in their hierarchy. Somewhere between inconvenient and invisible. At lunch, I slipped the card into the bottom drawer of my desk, beneath a pile of old project files. Not because I wanted to keep it, because someday, when the hurt dulled into something almost forgettable, I would need to remember. I would need to remember why I stopped trying. The rest of the afternoon passed in a fog. I checked tasks off my list, answered emails, pretended I didn't feel the hot sting behind my eyes every time someone mentioned family in casual conversation. At 5:30, I gathered my things. As I left the office, I passed Eliza again. She smiled brightly. "See you tomorrow?" I smiled back, automatic and hollow. "Yeah, see you." The parking lot was already half empty, long shadows stretching across the asphalt. I slid into my car and sat there for a moment, hands resting on the wheel, breathing in the sharp scent of the leather seats. They hadn't saved me a seat. They hadn't even looked for me when I wasn't there. That was the moment I decided. If they wouldn't save me a seat, I would build my own table. I spent the next few weeks quietly shifting the gears of my life. If they wouldn't make space for me, then fine. I would carve out my own. Every evening after work, I stayed late, perfecting client files, volunteering for the trickier accounts no one else wanted to touch. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. I didn't need their applause. I wanted to build something they couldn't erase. One afternoon, after finalizing a major audit ahead of schedule, my manager called me into his office. I wiped my hands on my skirt, heart hammering harder than I cared to admit. He smiled and handed me a certificate. "Congratulations, Malis. You've been nominated for the Emerging Entrepreneur Award by the Santa Barbara Small Business Association." For a moment, I just stared at it. It wasn't a Nobel Prize. It wasn't the cover of Forbes. But it was real. It was mine. Recognition for something no one could take credit for but me. That night, I sat at my kitchen table under the soft hum of the overhead light, composing a short, careful email to my mother. I kept it light, formal almost, attaching a copy of the nomination notice. "Thought you'd like to know. Hope you're well." I hesitated before hitting send, staring at the blinking cursor the way someone might stare at an empty mailbox, praying for a letter that never came. Then I clicked send. The reply came 5 minutes later. A single thumbs-up emoji. No words, no congratulations. No, we're proud of you. Not even a good job. A reaction you could give to a funny cat video or a meme, not your daughter's first professional milestone. I sat there, staring at the tiny cartoon hand. It almost felt too absurd to hurt. Almost. 2 days later, Vera invited me to a family lunch. Against my better judgment, I went. Part of me, the part that still remembered birthday cakes and bedtime stories, hoped that maybe, just maybe, there was something genuine behind the invite. The restaurant was one of those bright, noisy Italian places downtown. Red checkered tablecloths, fake grapevines on the ceiling, waiters who shouted drink orders across the room. The kind of place you couldn't be angry in. At least, not loudly. Everyone was already seated when I arrived. Callista spotted me first. Her smile was wide, her wave exaggerated. "There she is," she called out, as if I were the guest of honor instead of an afterthought. I sat down, nodding politely to Vera and Edric. Neither stood. Neither smiled much either. The waiter took our drink orders. Chatter buzzed around the table. New cars, new renovations, Callista's upcoming vacation to the Bahamas, while I stirred my water with a straw, unseen. Then, just as the pasta arrived, Callista tapped her wineglass with a fork. "I think we should raise a toast," she declared. I straightened slightly in my seat. Maybe they had planned something after all. "To Melis," Callista said, her tone syrupy sweet, "for finally, almost doing something noteworthy." A ripple of laughter rolled through the table, light at first, then bolder as the others caught on. Someone at the far end, a second cousin I barely knew, added, "Hey, a participation trophy is still a trophy, right?" More laughter. Louder now. Even Edric chuckled behind his hand. Vera smiled thinly, sipping her wine. I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. The air around me thickened, the clatter of plates and glasses fading into a dull roar in my ears. I wanted to say something, anything, but my mouth felt filled with cotton. The humiliation settled into my bones, heavy and familiar. I forced a smile, nodded as if I were part of the joke, pretended my heart wasn't crumbling into 1,000 sharp, glittering pieces under my ribs. Excusing myself, I pushed back from the table, careful not to scrape the chair too loudly, careful not to let them see the tremble in my hands. Outside, the evening air bit at my skin, raw and bracing. I leaned against the cold metal railing that bordered the restaurant's patio, the chill seeping into my palms. It grounded me. It reminded me that I was still real, even if they refused to see me. Inside, laughter floated through the closed windows, muffled but cruel in its persistence. I wasn't stupid. I wasn't naive anymore. They didn't want to celebrate me. They didn't even want me to think I deserved celebration. In that moment, I realized if I ever wanted a place to belong, I'd have to build it myself, brick by painful brick. And next time, they would see me, whether they liked it or not. The air in my tiny apartment felt different now, heavier, sharper, as if my determination had its own gravity. Planning my own victory didn't mean slamming doors or throwing accusations. It meant doing the work they would never be able to ignore, no matter how hard they tried to pretend otherwise. I spent nights polishing every piece of my award submission, triple-checking references, reviewing my pitch like my life depended on it. I practiced speeches in front of the bathroom mirror, behind locked doors, where no one could laugh or roll their eyes. The world outside moved forward like it always did. Coffee shops buzzed, cars honked at every light, the ocean whispered along the edges of the city. But inside me, something quieter was unfolding. A different kind of preparation, a foundation being laid, brick by brick. When the family brunch invite arrived, I accepted it with a detached politeness. It was hosted at a local bistro downtown, one of those upscale casual places, where avocado toast somehow cost $15 and everyone pretended not to notice. I arrived a little early, ordered a latte to sip while I waited. The server, a young woman with a tired smile, brought it over with a quick, "You're early. That's rare around here." I smiled back but said nothing. I had learned silence could be sharper than any blade. The rest of them trickled in, noisy and familiar. Vera bustling in with Edric just behind her. Callista, of course, already talking about how crazy busy her life was. Some cousins I barely knew. When we were all seated, menus scattered across the table, Vera clinked her water glass with a butter knife. "Everyone, I just want to take a second," she announced brightly. "Our family's doing so well, especially our Callista, who's up for that entrepreneur award. Isn't that amazing?" A round of clapping broke out, enthusiastic, mindless. I felt the blood drain from my face. I opened my mouth, closed it. Then, forcing my voice steady, I said, "Actually, that's me. I'm the nominee." A silence fell over the table, thick and unnatural, like someone had sucked all the oxygen out of the room. Vera's smile wavered. Then she laughed. A tight, brittle sound. "Oh, well, you know how close you two are. It's easy to get mixed up. Edric chuckled, reaching for the bread basket as if nothing unusual had happened. Callista shrugged, fixing her napkin on her lap. I sat there, tasting metal on my tongue. The conversation stumbled forward after that, but I wasn't really listening anymore. They talked about the award ceremony next, Vera mentioning how she'd saved seats in the front row for Callista and Edric. "That'll be perfect," she chirped. "It'll look great in pictures." No one said anything about a seat for me. No one even asked if I needed one. I let my eyes wander over the people around me. People who were supposed to be my family, who couldn't even pretend to support me without getting it wrong. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't thoughtlessness. It was a choice. They didn't see me. They didn't want to. Something clicked inside my chest then. Not a sharp snap, but a slow, deliberate turning like a key in a lock. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. I was done trying to squeeze into spaces never meant for me. As the server dropped off our plates, scrambled eggs, pancakes, overpriced bacon, I placed my hands firmly on the table. I looked straight at Vera, straight at Callista, straight at all of them. "It's okay," I said calmly. "You won't need to save me a seat." No one said a word. No one asked what I meant. They just nodded, awkward and relieved, like they were grateful I wasn't going to make a scene. I finished my coffee in 2 long gulps, tossed a few bills onto the table, and stood up. The sun outside was bright, the sidewalk shimmering with the thick warmth of a California morning. I slipped on my sunglasses and kept walking, each step lighter than the last. I wasn't part of their picture. Good. It was time to frame my own. The day after that brunch, I woke early, still carrying the weight of everything left unsaid. Morning sunlight poured through the blinds, but inside me it stayed dim and cold. As promised to myself, I began preparing for the award ceremony, not as a daughter hoping for applause, but as a woman who would no longer wait to be noticed. I steamed my dress, a modest but elegant navy blue gown I'd chosen months ago, long before I knew how much I would need it. I practiced my acceptance speech in the quiet of my living room, reading the words into the empty space, tweaking every line so it wouldn't sound desperate or pleading. Only dignified. If anyone was going to acknowledge me that night, it would start with me acknowledging myself. By late afternoon, I folded the speech neatly and placed it into my clutch. The house smelled faintly of fabric softener from the laundry I had done earlier, and the rhythmic hum of the dryer made the silence feel almost normal. That's when I heard a soft knock at the door. Confused, I wiped my hands on a kitchen towel and went to open it. On the welcome mat, there was no one, only a small envelope, half tucked beneath a paperweight shaped like a seashell. Curious, I picked it up. On the front, in the unmistakable scrawl of a child's hand, were the words, "For Aunt Malis, good luck." Inside, a hand-drawn card, full of crooked stars and a smiling stick figure labeled "You." At the bottom, in uneven crayon letters, it read, "You're the best. Love, Lucan." My throat closed up. Lucan, Callista's little boy. In a world where adults edited me out of photos, out of memories, out of invitations, a child had remembered me, on his own, without being told, without expectation. I set the card on the kitchen counter with trembling fingers and leaned against the wall, needing a moment to breathe. Later that evening, as twilight draped the sky in soft purples and golds, I sat by the window, cradling a cup of tea, letting the card rest in my lap. The phone rang, its shrillness breaking the stillness. I glanced at the caller ID, Vera. I let it ring twice before answering, steeling myself. On the other end, her voice was bright, saccharine. "Hi, honey. Just letting you know we're getting everything set for the ceremony. We'll be there cheering Callista on." I froze. "Mom," I said carefully. "You mean Malis, right? I'm the nominee?" There was a pause, a fraction too long. "Oh, yes, that's what I meant. You know how it is, my brain's all over the place these days." She laughed it off like a dropped fork. My grip tightened around the phone. As we spoke, I caught snippets of background conversation. Vera chatting with someone else, not bothering to mute the call. I heard her say, clear as day, "Well, between you and me, Milas only got that nomination because they're trying to check diversity boxes. You know how things are now." The words hit harder than any slap could have. I ended the call without another word. I stood there, the phone dangling in my hand, staring into the dim room as if I could somehow unhear it. All the effort, all the loneliness, all the dignity I had fought so hard to keep, reduced to a political checkbox in her mind. I sat down heavily on the couch, the card from Lucan slipping from my lap to the floor. I bent to pick it up, holding it close, letting silent tears track down my face. Not loud sobs, not the kind of crying that demands to be noticed, just the quiet leaking of something long, long broken. I didn't know how long I sat there, clutching that card like a lifeline. But somewhere between the tears, a thought formed. Steady, fierce. I wasn't going to let them define me. Not anymore. I wiped my face, straightened my shoulders, and stood. My dress hung ready by the door. The invitation, bearing my name spelled correctly in black and gold, sat atop the counter, waiting. I picked it up, feeling its weight. This time, I whispered into the quiet, I'm not waiting for anyone to clap. Whether they showed up or not, whether they cared or not, whether they even said my name correctly or not, I would stand on that stage, and they would watch, whether they wanted to or not. I pulled the zipper of my dress up slowly, listening to the quiet slide of fabric against fabric. Tonight wasn't about anger or revenge. It was about standing up, even if my knees shook. The drive to the Grand Hotel downtown felt like moving through a dream. The streets bathed in golden light, couples strolling the sidewalks, valet attendants bustling in pressed uniforms. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. This was my night. I parked, adjusted my clutch in my lap, and took a slow breath before stepping out. The cool evening air brushed against my skin, calming the racing pulse beneath my collarbone. Inside, the grand ballroom glittered with chandeliers, crisp white linens, and the soft hum of polite conversation. Servers floated by with trays of champagne and bite-sized hors d'oeuvres. I scanned the crowd. There they were, my parents and Callista, already seated in the VIP section at the very front. Callista, in a dramatic beaded gown that screamed for attention, was flipping her hair over her shoulder as Vera adjusted the folds of her shawl. Edric leaned back, glancing occasionally at his watch, looking as though he were doing the event a favor simply by attending. None of them noticed me. I didn't wave. I didn't smile. I simply walked past them, taking a modest seat at the back of the room. A strange calm settled over me, like slipping into a pool of water after standing in the sun too long. Minutes passed. Then a hush fell over the room as the event coordinator approached the podium, tapping the microphone gently. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight to celebrate the extraordinary talents of emerging entrepreneurs in our community. I crossed one ankle over the other beneath the table, my hands resting lightly in my lap. Award after award was called. Smiles, handshakes, flashes of cameras. I clapped when appropriate, my heart drumming louder with each name that wasn't mine. And then, for the Rising Entrepreneur Award, the host said, pausing for effect, the envelope trembling slightly in her manicured hands. This year's honoree is Malis Kincaid. The spotlight snapped onto me like a heat lamp. Gasps fluttered through the audience. Heads turned, chairs shifted. At the very front, Vera's hand slipped, knocking her champagne flute to the floor with a sharp, crystalline shatter. Callista's face paled. Edric sat rigid, blinking as though he were trying to clear his vision. I rose slowly, the applause around me like a distant tide. The hem of my dress brushed the floor as I walked. One step, then another, each footfall heavier with meaning than the last. As I approached the stage, I caught sight of my family again. Their faces frozen, their mouths tight. For the first time in my life, they weren't looking past me. They were looking at me, and not because they wanted to. The host extended the award plaque toward me with a broad, welcoming smile. "Congratulations, Malis," she said into the microphone. "Your work has set a new standard of excellence for us all." The applause grew louder. I accepted the award, its weight solid and cool against my palms. I turned to face the crowd, the ballroom swimming in 1,000 points of light. Without hesitating, I stepped up to the podium. "Thank you," I began, my voice steady. Not because it was easy, not because it was handed to me, but because sometimes the ones left out build the strongest foundations. A soft murmur rippled through the audience. A few people clapped harder. In the front row, Vera's cheeks had flushed an angry red. Callista stared down at her lap, pretending to smooth a non-existent wrinkle from her dress. I scanned the room once more. I didn't look for approval anymore. I didn't search their faces for pride or forgiveness. I looked for my own reflection. In the polished hardwood floors, in the chandeliers above, in the way the light caught the edges of the plaque in my hands. This was mine. This had always been mine. As the evening wore on, the award recipients were invited to mingle, pose for photos, and celebrate. I moved through the crowd gracefully, exchanging polite nods and occasional handshakes. I noticed Vera attempt to approach once, hesitate, then veer off toward the buffet table. Callista whispered furiously to Edric, who gave her a tight shake of the head. They had been so certain, so sure I would stay small, quiet, tucked away in the background. Tonight, there was no hiding. Tonight, they had no choice but to see. Toward the end of the evening, I found a quiet corner by the grand staircase and allowed myself a single long breath. Not sadness, not anger, just peace. Holding the award close, I turned once more to look at them, the family that had spent a lifetime editing me out of the frame. Our eyes met. I didn't need to say anything. Everything they had refused to acknowledge was now engraved in gold, standing between us, undeniable. They could laugh behind closed doors, whisper in private phone calls, pretend among themselves that it didn't matter. But from tonight on, they could never erase me again, not from this moment. The after-party was tucked away in one of the hotel's private lounges, a velvet-draped room with low golden lights and soft piano music floating in the air. I held my award close to my side as I entered, each step a quiet affirmation that I deserved to be here, among these faces, under this chandelier. I hadn't even made it to the refreshment table when I spotted them, Vera and Callista, cutting through the crowd like heat-seeking missiles. For one brief second, I wondered if they were here to finally say something kind, even if awkwardly. Maybe congratulations, or at least a stiff nod of acknowledgement. But I should have known better. Callista reached me first, her voice sharp and slicing through the gentle hum of conversation. "You must be so proud of yourself," she sneered loudly enough for nearby guests to hear, "taking credit for things you didn't even do." Conversations around us slowed, some heads turning. Vera stepped up beside her, the perfect tag team. She added with a syrupy smile that didn't touch her eyes, "I guess some people know how to work the system better than others. Affirmative action, right?" The air went still. A server passing by froze awkwardly before deciding to back away without offering the champagne flute he carried. Inside, something in me locked into place, solid, unshakable. I took a step back, setting the award gently down on a nearby table as if preparing for a different kind of ceremony. "Is that really the story you want to tell tonight?" I asked, my voice calm, almost curious. Callista's expression faltered, but she doubled down, tossing her hair over her shoulder. "Everyone knows you just got lucky. People feel sorry for, leftovers." There it was again, the word they'd clung to like a weapon. Around us, the circle of onlookers grew. Faces I recognized from the business community, potential clients, investors, city council members, now watching, wine glasses paused halfway to their mouths. Perfect. Without raising my voice, I reached into my clutch and pulled out a slim folder. White, sealed, marked confidential. I flipped it open deliberately. "This," I said, holding up the top letter, "is the official verification from the awards committee, confirming my independent nomination and achievement record." I slipped it onto the nearby table with a soft smack. "This," I continued, pulling out another sheet, "is a notarized copy of my project portfolios, including timestamps, client testimonials, and tax filings." Another document joined the pile, and these, I laid down 2 more sheets, are endorsements from 3 independent judges, all verifying that no external influence or favoritism was involved. I finished with a final tap of the folder, steady and sharp against the polished surface. Silence. Callista's face paled, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. Vera stammered something about misunderstandings and clerical errors, but it was too late. The event coordinator appeared at my side, her crisp suit immaculate, her expression neutral but firm. "I'm sorry. she said to Vera and Callista, keeping her voice low but impossible to ignore. "We maintain a zero-tolerance policy for public disruptions. I'm going to have to ask you both to leave." A ripple of murmured agreement swept through the room. The flush rising up Vera's neck was almost purple. Callista looked like she might cry, but for once, she wasn't the center of sympathy. As security discreetly ushered them toward the exit, I stood perfectly still, my chin high. Not triumphant, not gloating, simply solid. As they disappeared through the doors, the space they left behind didn't feel like a loss. It felt like fresh air rushing into a room that had been suffocating for years. A few guests approached me, some offering congratulations again, others simply nodding with respect. No pity, no backhanded compliments, just quiet acknowledgement that I had earned my place and defended it without sinking to their level. I returned to the table where my award sat gleaming under the light. I lifted it again, cradling it in my hands not like a weapon, but like something sacred. They had tried so hard to silence me, to erase me, but tonight the only thing erased was their control. I exhaled slowly, feeling lighter than I had in years. In the quiet that followed their departure, I didn't hear whispers or shame or doubt. I heard something else entirely. Something small but fierce. My own worth. The award still rested on my kitchen counter when I came home that night, but I didn't rush to move it. For once, I didn't need to clutch it, didn't need to keep proving to myself that it was real. Instead, a week later, I found myself sitting on my tiny balcony, a chipped mug of coffee cooling by my elbow, the ocean stretching beyond the rooftops of Santa Barbara. The sea breeze combed through my hair, threading salt into the air. Somewhere far below, kids laughed as they ran down to the beach. Next to me, propped carefully against a small plant, was the glass plaque, the one they had tried so hard to pretend didn't exist. It caught the morning light, throwing soft rainbows across the cracked concrete at my feet, and for the first time, I realized I didn't need applause. The ocean clapped well enough for me. I sipped my coffee slowly, letting the silence anchor me. A buzz from my phone broke the stillness. I glanced down and saw the name, Vera. The message was short. "Proud of you. Hope you'll come by next Sunday." No apology, no acknowledgement, no mention of the years erased, the dinner skipped, the birthdays forgotten, the name swapped. Just a vague, dangling branch, brittle and hollow. I stared at it for a long moment, feeling nothing. No rage, no hunger, no desperate ache to be seen. That emptiness used to terrify me. Now it felt like peace. I thumbed out a reply, short, polite. "Thank you. I have other plans." No drama, no explanations, no door left ajar for them to walk back in without earning it. I hit send, set the phone face down on the table, and leaned back into the chair that had become my new throne. Inside, my small apartment glowed with a warmth it hadn't held a year ago. Not because anything grand had changed, the same peeling linoleum, the same secondhand furniture, but because I had changed. I wasn't standing outside anymore, nose pressed to a glass window, waiting for someone to unlock the door. I was home. Turning my head slightly, my eyes landed on another object sitting proudly on the counter. A crayon drawing, the paper slightly wrinkled at the edges from being carried by small, determined hands. Lucan's good luck card. "For Aunt Milas, you're the best." I smiled. Real, unforced. Love didn't always come wrapped in polished speeches or grand gestures. Sometimes it came in crooked letters and sticky tape, delivered quietly by the only heart brave enough to stand by you when no one else would. I stood up, gathering the award and Lucan's card together, placing them side by side on the little floating shelf I had installed myself. A seat at the table? I chuckled under my breath. Why did I ever think I needed their table to begin with? I had my own now, and it was built stronger, brick by brick, moment by moment, not out of obligation or bloodlines, but out of resilience, grit, and stubborn hope. My phone buzzed again, but I ignored it this time. Some invitations didn't deserve a response. I uncorked a bottle of champagne, one I had bought months ago but never had the nerve to open. The pop echoed softly against the walls. Pouring a modest glass, I stepped back out onto the balcony, raising it high to the sky, painted in gold and pink. No audience, no crowd, no clapping, just me, and the world that no longer frightened me. I whispered to the wind, to the city, to the girl I used to be. Here's to the seats we build when none are saved for us. And I sipped, letting the bubbles dance down my throat, carrying away every last fragment of the girl who had once waited for permission to belong. The sun dipped lower, kissing the edge of the water. Inside, my apartment pulsed with quiet music and the steady beat of a heart that had finally learned to sing for itself. And for the first time, the seat was mine, and the view was better than I had ever imagined. Sometimes, family drama doesn't come with shouting or slammed doors. Sometimes it's the quiet moments, the birthdays forgotten, the seats left empty, that cut the deepest. But maybe that's where real strength is born. Not from being invited, but from daring to build your own place. Have you ever had to find your own seat at the table? Tell me in the comments. I read everyone. And if you believe in rising even when no one cheers for you, make sure to subscribe. There's more stories like this waiting for you.